In this brief lecture, I'll talk a little bit about password management. I'll share a bit about why passwords are important, how we can practice good password hygiene, and some additional considerations. First point, it's not good to reuse the same password again and again. I think a lot of us know that, and yet we still use the same passwords anyways. Why do we use the same password for multiple accounts, even when we know that it's not the best choice? It's because it seems that almost every app requires you to set up a new account and a new password. If you have 50 apps and you have personal email accounts, your bank accounts, you have health insurance accounts, reusing the same password starts to look really, really appealing. Unfortunately, hackers are sort of counting on this. They know that a lot of us use easy passwords. Some of the most common passwords are the word password, 123, 1739, etc. These will attack an account with a litany of passwords, and these common ones often work. Here's a link to a really interesting article. I encourage you to take a look at it. It was posted in the New York Times earlier this year, and it's about sort of the nature of passwords. It gets a little into the psychology and linguistics and anthropology of password creation. But the article is talking mostly about in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center, the investment firm Cantor Fitzgerald was completely wiped out, but they needed to get into the employees' accounts so they can get the company back up and running. And so what they needed to do was interview the employees' family members and ask them about anniversary dates, names of pets, nicknames, things like that, because they found that most passwords had some sort of defining characteristic of the person in them. And it worked. They were able to get the company back up and running 2 days after the attack, even though most of their employees perished. Later in the same article, they were referencing a huge data breach in which a lot of passwords were leaked, and they analyzed this password database, and they found that at least 1 of every 10 users chose a name or a name plus a year for their password, and 2 of every 1,000 passwords was the word password. When they were talking about that data breach, they also talked about how the word love was by far the most common verb found in passwords, and the most popular adjectives were sexy, hot, and pink. While a lot of us put a lot of our personal identities into our passwords, it's important that you consider the personal data that you're trying to protect. It might be your personal data, your family's personal data, and in the case of your iPad, it could even be your students' personal data. And so it's important to manage the risks accordingly. It's also important to not become apathetic. We hear a lot about data breaches. It seems like there's one every other day. But because we hear about so many security breaches, it's easy to ignore them. But it's important not to become apathetic, and if you do hear of one, to go ahead and change your password right away. There are a lot of password management tools on the market. One that I use personally is called LastPass, and it works really well across multiple devices. It can help with auto-generated passwords, which will help you to avoid using passwords that contain personal information that might be easy for someone to guess. You can also find apps on your phone or on your tablet that will auto-generate passwords for you that's separate from the password manager. It's nice because a lot of these password managers will sync across devices, so you can use it on your laptop, your iPad, and on your phone. But there are still some downsides. One is that you must remember the password to your password manager, and it needs to be a secure one. Even with the downsides, it's still better than writing down your passwords on a piece of paper, and it's much, much better than reusing the same password across multiple accounts. you may notice that biometrics are starting to be used a lot more. Things like fingerprint scans and iris scans are being used to increase security for different accounts. However, most of them are being used in conjunction with a password. So unfortunately, passwords are probably not going to go away anytime in the near future. Therefore, it's important to practice good password hygiene. And so part of practicing good password hygiene is to not share your passwords. After you've gone through the process of creating a secure password, updating it every 90 days or so, you'll want to avoid sharing it with people. It seems like this should go without saying. However, um, faculty often offer up their passwords voluntarily to IT people at SPU. And IT professionals at SPU do not need to have your password to do their jobs. Using the iPad in the classroom can help you be untethered. It can help you build relationships with students, but part of building that relationship is protecting your personal data and the personal data of your students. It's it's very important that you know your passwords or you have a system for managing your passwords. That every time you create a new account with an app, that you're using a secure password and that you're teaching these strategies to your students as well. Because in this increasingly interconnected world, your password strength matters not just for you, but also for your students.